see. And we'll talk about Meraki first a little bit, and then we'll jump into the more specific pieces about this individual customer. So as I mentioned, my name is Joe. I've got Tanya here in the room with me as well from our marketing team, who will be helping out answering some questions as we go through. So please do feel free to ask questions using the Q&A feature of the webinar. We'll also spare some time for Q&A at the end as well. So here's what we're going to go through today. I'll talk about Meraki a little bit, get into, what is Meraki, what do we do, how does it work, right, a little bit of that. And then once we've done that, we'll dive into Schalmont CSD specifically, what they've done, how they've deployed Meraki, their experience with it, and I'll pass that off to Terry to talk a little bit about, what they've seen and how they've worked with the products. And then we'll get into a demo. We'll actually take a look at Schalmont's network specifically. We'll dive back into some slide work, talk about the different products available from Meraki, and then we'll save some time at the end, if all goes well, for Q&A. I like to make sure we have a good chunk of time there because we usually get some pretty great questions. We want to make sure we have time to answer them. So while you should feel free to ask questions in the Q&A window, if there are any that come up that Tanya feels would be really good for everyone to hear the answer to, or come in at the end, or questions that you have for Terry, that's the time we'll use for that there at the end. So what is Cisco Meraki? Well, first things first, we're obviously part of Cisco. We're a cloud-managed networking vendor. So what we mean by that is we provide network equipment, in this case wireless, switching, security, and MDM, that is all managed from the cloud. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means and what cloud managed means specifically in the context of Meraki. I'm not going to get too deep into the rest of this slide. I'm just talking about our growth. We've seen phenomenal growth, and I'm going to show you actually an example of that right before we dive into the demo. But the second two-thirds of this slide basically just serves to tell you that we're great. So just let's all get on the same page that Meraki is great and move on to the next slide. We have historically done very well in education. It's been a very rewarding vertical for us. We have great relationships with a lot of our education customers. It was one of the first kind of markets to really respond to the Meraki value proposition, largely because, in my opinion at least, schools tend to have very, very complex requirements for their networks, but a very small dedicated IT staff. They tend not to have a fleet of CCIEs on staff to handle every little thing. So it's important to get a lot of mileage out of a networking solution. You have to be able to get a lot done with a relatively small amount of time and kind of resource investment, because you don't have all that much time to spare. You have a small group of people trying to manage generally a fairly large and somewhat complex network in a lot of ways. So that's, I think, why Meraki solution that makes it very simple to manage networks at scale and to manage, pretty much any network has been so well responded to by the education community and the education IT community specifically. So we've got a few examples here of K-12 schools that use Meraki today. There are quite a few more. This is just a basic example. I will show you when we get into the dashboard demo, I'll show you our list of education demo networks, and you'll see that it's actually quite a bit larger than our other list, just because historically that was what we were very strong in first. So again, what do we mean when we say cloud managed networks? Well, it's important to distinguish between this and networking in the cloud or cloud services. So what we're doing is not passing the traffic through the cloud to filter it, or doing the actual routing in the cloud, or any kind of software-defined networking in the cloud. What we're doing is traditional networking to some extent, where you have firewalls, right, security devices, switches, access points, and even MDM endpoints that are in your network. For the three hardware products, security, switching, and wireless, there's physical devices that are in your network, but all the configuration and monitoring of those devices takes place via cloud connectivity. So we'll talk about what that actually looks like, but there's two pieces to it. And the first one we're going to talk about is the connectivity between the device and the cloud. So that's what you see on this diagram to the left here. It's important to understand a couple things. One is this is fully out of band, so you can see the diagram there has your WAN traffic going out along a separate path in the management data. It's important to understand that we're not sending the actual traffic on the network to the cloud. What we're doing is we have a separate out-of-band channel for communication between the device and the cloud. And what happens is that a Meraki device, when it's brought online, connected to the internet, goes out, finds the Meraki cloud, and forms a tunnel to it, an encapsulated and encrypted tunnel that it can use to pull down configuration information that you've put into the cloud interface, or to ship up monitoring data so you can see what's going on in your network, keep you informed, give you greater visibility into what's happening on the network. So that first point on the right there, that first bullet point under secure, is very important to know, that we do not send your user data through the cloud. For compliance and security reasons and privacy reasons, it's very important that that's understood, which is why I stress it pretty heavily. You'll also notice in the diagram that the amount of bandwidth used by that management traffic is very minimal. It's about 1 kilobit per second on average, because all we're doing is pulling down configurations and sending up little metadata bits about what's happening on the network. So it's very lightweight, which is one reason why we built a protocol specifically for this, was to make sure we had a protocol that was not going to consume a lot of bandwidth, because if you've got 20, 30, 100, 1,000 of these devices, you don't want them all sucking down a ton of bandwidth in order to communicate with the cloud. There's a lot of great compliance, certification, security, and reliability information here. I'm not going to get into too much of this because all of it's available at meraki.cisco.com/trust. If you're interested in things like SIPA compliance, other compliance, our auditing scheme, SC 16, right, all of that, you can find all that information at that trust site linked down at the bottom of the page. So if you're interested in that, that's the place to look. The one other thing I do want to mention on this slide, though, is the second to last bullet point down at the very bottom on the right. Network functions even if connection to cloud is interrupted. The reason we put this on here is it's one of the most common questions we get. Well, if it's cloud controlled, what happens if I lose connectivity to the cloud? What happens to my network? And the answer is really very little, because the device, while it is cloud controlled, it gets the config from the cloud, it pulls that down and stores it locally and runs off it locally, which means that if you lose connectivity to the cloud, the device just keeps operating on the configuration it already has, keeps passing traffic, serving clients, all that good stuff. For the security appliance, keeps doing all the standard security feature set that you've got enabled. So really the main difference is you won't be able to change the configuration until it reconnects to the cloud. Any changes you were to make to the cloud dashboard in that time just basically get buffered, for lack of a better term, and then once the dashboard and the device are able to communicate again, it would send down that config and the device would get it, implement it, move on, right? But your traffic continues to pass, everything continues to function the same way it did when you lost connectivity. The other cool thing about this is we can actually, for things like traffic analytics and other analytics data about what's happening in the network, that application visibility and client visibility data, we can store that locally. We buffer it on the device, sort of in the reverse of the model of the config, where you get the config down once you're reconnected. Same thing with the traffic in the other direction. So you have your monitoring data that's stored on the device until we reconnect to the cloud, and then it ships that up and backfills that time period. So if you were to look at, say, a traffic analysis graph in the dashboard for a time when you didn't have cloud connectivity, it wouldn't be a big gray section, right? Once we've reconnected, we backfill that with the data we've stored locally, and we can fill it in. So you don't have a big gap. You just have, oh, we have that data because we just filled it all back in once we were reconnected. So what is it that, and I sort of talked about the fact that we've seen phenomenal success in education, and particularly in K-12, especially in the early days of Meraki. So what is it that makes this such a lucrative, such a popular solution for education? Well, as I said, one of the biggest things is just the ease of use and scalability, because when you have limited IT resources, it's very important to make sure that none of that's going to waste, right? That everything you're doing is actually producing. And one of the things that's great about the Cisco Meraki platform is that it's very easy to pick up and it's very easy to work with once you've learned it. So we have the centralized dashboard that you're going to see today in the demo, and that dashboard is phenomenally easy for anyone with an IT or networking background to pick up, because it's all GUI based, there's no command line, it's very simple, it's very straightforward, and once you've learned how to manage one Meraki device, you can actually pretty much translate it directly to the others, because they're all managed in the same interface. So if you go from managing your APs to managing Meraki security, you don't have to learn a whole new interface or learn new, it's just different menu options in the same GUI, which is really valuable. At the top, the very top of that, we say no training, and I modify that a little bit, which is very little training required. We do a training for our partners that's called CMNA, and I've run this many, many times now. And the cool thing about CMNA is it really highlights this intuitive nature of dashboard for two reasons. One is it's something that we go through all 4 products in a day. We do a 1-day intensive, we start at 9, we end around 5, and we do all 4 product lines, and we teach these partners how to manage a Meraki, how to configure and manage a Meraki network. Being able to fully get through 4 product lines, 4 full separate products, and how to manage all 4 of those products in a day is phenomenal. I can't learn to manage most networking products in a day. I can't learn to manage 4 of any networking product in a day. to the degree that I would consider to be, you know, actually content in it. So it really speaks to that. And then the other thing about it is that we go through the first product and there's, you know, questions, people are still figuring it out. By the time we get to the end, very few questions, because again, once you learn to manage one product with Meraki, all of the others, that knowledge kind of just translates through because it's a very similar, very kind of simple management interface that follows from product to product. Another great thing about it is the remote management capability. So if you have satellite campuses or a large campus where it's not necessarily feasible to be running all over the campus trying to figure out what's going on at every individual device, we build in these kind of centralized management capabilities and troubleshooting and diagnostic capabilities into the dashboard. A lot of stuff that you would normally use a third-party tool to get with most solutions. So you have things like packet capture done through the cloud. You have live tools which allow you to get data about, you know, run a ping, run a traceroute, standard troubleshooting tools, get the DHCP leases on a DHCP-capable device, some diagnostic information about what's going on with wireless, are we passing traffic properly onto different VLANs from the wireless to the wired network. It's all kind of built in, and the idea is that you should be able to do all of your troubleshooting, all of your management from the cloud without ever having to be physically in front of the device unless you have to do something physical like unplug, replug a cable, right? The other thing is that because we centralize all this management, you manage the entire network in one place. And you'll see that when we get into dashboard. We actually combine security switching and wireless into one kind of configuration container, is the term I like to use. We call them networks. So you manage a whole site as opposed to managing individual devices. You don't have to go, oh, I'm managing my security, now I'm going to go over and manage my wireless. Now I'm going to go over and manage my switching. It's all in one place. And even moving between sites, if you have multiple campuses or satellites, is very, very simple. It's just you pull out a drop-down that says, okay, here are your sites. You click the one you want, and then you manage everything at that site in that pane. So it's very, very straightforward. I would argue, I've seen the term zero-touch provisioning or zero-touch deployment is massively overused in the networking world. It really is. And Meraki is the closest I've seen. It's the only solution I've ever worked with as someone who was a Meraki customer before coming to work here that really does offer zero-touch deployment. I mean, it's massively simpler than anything that I've worked with. It's crazy how easy it is because all you do is you go into the cloud, you configure all the settings, right? That kind of configuration container in the cloud. You say, here's all the settings I want, and then you attach a device to it. And mind you, you can do all this while the device is offline, while it's still on a truck on its way to the location. It doesn't matter. You're doing all this in the cloud. Once you've attached that device to it, and that device gets plugged in on site, gets power and internet, it goes up, contacts the cloud, identifies itself, and then downloads that configuration and just goes. Which means that the actual on-site deployment piece, all you have to do physically with the device is plug it into power, plug it into internet, plug in whatever you want on the LAN side of an MF instance. That's it. All the actual configuration, all the deployment pieces, all the setup is done from the cloud, which means if you're deploying at scale, it's very, very easy to just have someone pop that in. Anyone who knows which side of an RJ45 is up can pretty much set this up, and then the IT team back at central campus, headquarters, wherever, can know that they can then monitor and configure it from there. There's very little actual work involved in the deployment itself. Finally, and this sort of goes back to some of the centralized management pieces, but we build a lot of monitoring capabilities and alerting capabilities directly into the dashboard. And the reason I really like that is that I traditionally have, in other networks, used third-party monitoring tools, be it SolarWinds, NPM, or other tools that offer a lot of great visibility and are super valuable, but it's another platform. It's another thing that you have to use, that you have to learn, that you have to license, right? All these different things. Whereas with Meraki, we build a lot of that directly into the management interface. So the same place that you go in and configure devices, you also get the monitoring and alerting natively within that. So you get user fingerprinting via Active Directory or Radius. You get application fingerprinting with our Layer 7 analytics engine. You get device fingerprinting where we can tell you, oh, this particular client is this type of device. It's connected via wireless or wired. It's got these capabilities. It's passing this much traffic. And then you get monitoring and alerting on top of that. So you have things like, well, let's get alerted if a device goes down. Let's get alerted if we lose a VPN tunnel. We have all these capabilities where the alerts are sent directly from the cloud. So you don't need to stand up a mail server in order to do this. We'll just send it directly to you from our cloud. And we'll look at some of the monitoring capabilities. They're really pretty powerful when we get into the demo. We have SIPA-compliant content filtering and security filtering. So we have full-fledged SourceFire IPS running on the MXs, the security appliance. We have BrightCloud is the vendor, or actually WebRoot, but BrightCloud is offering content filtering, so URL-based content filtering that's by category or by specific patterns, also on the MX, and then malware scanning as well. So this full suite of security and kind of web and content security features that's valuable for any industry, but especially for education. So with that, let's take a look at Schalmont CSD specifically. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Terry to go ahead and talk about her experience with Meraki and what Schalmont's been using the product for.
Thank you. Schalmont several years ago realized that we needed to make some changes. We needed to move our students forward towards that 21st or even 22nd century skills. And we dove in and figured out what we were doing and what we felt we needed to change. And one of the things we identified right away was that our network at the time was 15 years old. It ran 24/7. It did a beautiful job of running 24/7. However, we knew that it just wasn't going to have enough of the power that we were going to need in the future. For example, when we put that network in, wireless did not even exist. It wasn't an option in anyone's mind. So we layered on top, a wireless system, but it just didn't mesh. And the controls and the things that we needed in order to manage this with our small department were really just overly intense, heavy, expensive, ongoing maintenance fees. It was just something we knew we needed to change at that point. So when we went out and began looking for a solution, of course, we were at the time Cisco, a Cisco site. We found out that Cisco had recently purchased Meraki, and they piqued our interest immediately. As soon as I saw the dashboard, I knew it was going to be a solution. It was fiscally responsible. It was easily accessible, and the interface on that dashboard was certainly going to solve most of my management problems. Schalmont is a smaller school for our area, and we do not have a large team. I'm the only person actually who deals with the network on a daily basis. So I needed a tool that I could utilize when I'm in my office, when I'm in the field, or when I'm not even here. I needed something that I could go in and see if my devices were up or down, where my traffic flows were, who was on, was it someone who should be. We knew we wanted to employ BYOD. We are this year starting out with a new plan. Every incoming ninth grader in our high school is going to receive a Chromebook. It's going to be theirs for the 4 years that they're in our high school, and then when they graduate, they'll turn it back in. And we knew we needed to up the ante on that wireless in order to allow this to happen. And we wanted to be able to watch them and to guide them and make sure that they weren't getting themselves in any trouble out there. So as we delved deeper into Meraki, we just saw the solution right before our very eyes. The dashboard, for example, just offers us a single point of entry and completely intuitive. So even though pre-Meraki I may have had 5 tools, I think, that did everything I needed, with Meraki, honestly, I'm using the dashboard. And he's already mentioned the notifications or system emails that you can receive. I don't even have to go into the dashboard first thing in the morning. I'm getting emails 24/7 that are telling me an access point is down, or a switch is having a problem, or even a port isn't communicating as it was. Maybe it dropped from 100 to 10. I mean, just so helpful. It's like having another person on site at all times, another set of eyes watching our systems. So for us, the investment has been golden. It has helped us already improve our network access. It's helped us allow for the deployment of laptops to every teacher throughout the entire district. We've given Chromebooks out to some teachers. We've replaced our laptop carts with those Chromebooks. I mean, mobile is everywhere. It's the word. We want very few people tied down to any location. And with Meraki and just the ability to watch all those access points, to make multiple SSIDs, to allow times and schedules on the SSIDs, to allow user accounts for authentication. It's just been the single point of solution for most of our issues when it came to how do we take our 15-year-old network and bring it up to the 21st century while still allowing ourselves to expand in the future, to not tie ourselves in, block ourselves into any kind of corner. So for us, the dashboard was the real selling point. And what we did with that was we went fully Meraki with our access points and all of our switches, which again, I see all of that in the dashboard. So I don't have to go to one to manage my wireless as I had in the past, and I don't have to go to another to see my switches, and I don't have to go to another to do something else. It's all in that dashboard. I mean, if I open it up, I see everything I need, and you'll see it in the demo. It's just all the information that I need, including what groups are utilizing what, where is my major use. Am I getting phone calls saying, hey, we can't get anywhere? Is it because something else is going on? Is something down, or is there heavy use? It's all before my eyes in a single point, which for me, being the only network person in the organization and being off and off site or at one of our remote schools, this was a solution. I've got the Meraki tool even on my cell phone, and again, I get notifications on my cell phone when something comes up or goes down, and I can investigate remotely no matter where I am. And it's been extremely helpful. I can be proactive rather than hearing about something hours later and having a group of frustrated users. For me to be able to be proactive, I'm getting the notification before the users even realize that they've lost power somewhere or that something has failed. It really has improved the technology department from the view of our users, from our students, teachers, and administrators' point of view. We can be proactive. They're seeing a lot less issues. We really had very few stumbling blocks getting this up and going. We've increased security and yet been able at the same time to give them more access to things outside of our own network because we have Meraki as that in-between, and it allows us to see so much about what's going on our network that we can open things up a little bit more, give our students and our administrators a little bit more access to some of the things that we were holding back on because we couldn't see what they were doing on the network. Meraki allows us to do that, which is a great educational advantage for our students. Right now, after the first year of deployment, we did find we had missed a few places, and we're putting in additional access points. We actually are eventually going to put one sometime this school year out even into our football field. So we will have a BYOD out there during events so that our coaches can all communicate, and we'll have immediate live access to resources that before it was only what they could do with their cell phones. Well, now they'll be able to do more with those devices even outside of our building. Right now, we've had a couple of network issues in the first year, and Meraki was the solution. If I got a phone call or noticed something was happening, I could always go right to Meraki, and in both situations I can think of, Meraki just right there on the dashboard was my problem. Oh, this wireless point is down. Oh, we've got a rogue on the network. Who's that, and what are they doing, and where are they? So several times this year, even in the first 12 months, Meraki proved to us the importance of that dashboard and what a tool it can be for the district.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Terry. And we'll also go through some questions with Terry at the end, ask her about the network. And I'm going to we're going to go into a demo. And since we're going through the Schalmont network, Terry, I'm going to kind of let you prompt me for what you think would be valuable to show, since obviously you know your network far better than I do. So here we've got the Shaman network. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Meraki dashboard, this is it. This is the GUI that I was talking about earlier and that Terry's been talking about. So you can see here that if we dive into, the Schalmont network here, we're going to see that we've got our switching and our wireless in the same place. And you could have security in here as well. And that's the thing I was talking about earlier, where you have that single pane of glass view into the entire site. It's not just about manage your wireless, manage your switching, manage your security, manage your MDM, right? You have all of that both at the site level and across different sites here as well. So when Terry said, I don't have to have a platform to go in and manage my wireless, I don't have to go in and manage another one for my switching, it's really something that I think is very valuable. So Terry, feel free to point me at the things that you think are kind of cool to show off to the folks we've got here.
Well, I usually start right where you are right now, Joe, and I have to tell you, this is extremely useful. I've actually given, and this is one of the features that I love about this, is you can give additional administrative rights to some of your technicians in your department or other people. I've given my help desk operator access. She can see, so when a client calls in the morning and says, hey, I can't get on, she can come right in here and immediately look them up. I love the search clients box, or any of the search boxes within the dashboard. You just begin to type the name of that client it comes up, and she can see whether they really are physically on, connected hardwired or wireless, and she can see that they're grayed out, which we love the fact that things come up that bright green, so we know immediately, are they connected, are they not connected, exactly. So that is extremely helpful to her. Even though she can't make any changes, she can find out how many people are on, who's on. If a teacher calls and says, my lab's not working, she can get on and she go, well, I see half the lab's up and they're hardwired. I see the other lab is having this problem. So it's been a helpful tool for us to also be able to give some other people view rights in here, which is a nice tool as well. So I often come here first when I'm helping a user who's having connectivity problems, see what's going on with them, then I can click immediately on them. I can see what it shows me when they were last on, how many hours they've been on now. That's one of the great things about the dashboard is whenever you see something green and glowing, you can kind of click on that and get additional information. So I don't have to go, okay, I found the user, now I have to click over on wireless on the left and go find, no, you're right here. It tells you exactly what access point they're on. It tells you the topology, the event log, you can do a packet capture. They've gone so far as to really think this out. And wherever I am, I usually don't have to go to the left and start at a top level menu and work my way down. I can almost always jump right where I am to where I need to be. The live links are just right there.
And I want to dig into that a little bit, Terry, because I think that's a great point. Let's talk about topology a little bit. This is actually one of my favorite features, and it was something that my favorite thing about it is actually that it was almost an accidental feature. It wasn't built originally around the idea of let's give customers more visibility into their networks, although that's what it became. It was built actually out of a request from our support team who said our customers are having trouble giving us accurate network diagrams, right? We've got people drawing on whiteboards, taking pictures, sending them to us. We've got people building them in Paint. This is something that if we're going to simplify the network and simplify the troubleshooting, we should give them a better tool to do this in order to kind of help us to help them. And so Topology was born. And what Topology is it's a live built topology, and in this case we grabbed it from a particular device, so we're seeing the path from that access point, that client's connectivity out to the internet is that dark line. If I clear that out, then we get the whole topology here, little round points here, the access points, we've got the switches, and then non-Meraki devices represented by these diamonds, and we can actually see information about them because what we're doing is on the switches we're aggregating CDP and LLDP neighbor data from everyone in the network in order to build this out dynamically. So Terry, if you guys, it sounded like you guys do use the topology. If you'd like to talk about that a little bit.
I do. I've used it a few times, again, when we had a situation and I was hunting something down. I like, as I coast around, again, the information is there. I don't have to go, okay, well, there's the switch, now I got to go over to the left and find the switch, and then I got to go move. It's just right there. If I were to click on one of these, it takes me right to the switch. I can see the ports and what's active in that switch, what's not active, which is, again, great. I can see the VLANs assigned to each, and I can quickly change them if something's incorrect. So, I mean, just this information, it's information at your fingertips all the time. That's just what it is. I don't have to go digging. I don't have to keep going up to a top-level menu and click 5 times down to find something. It's all those links that have saved me so much time, even in the first year, just an exorbitant amount of time. And a lot of times when I go to the topology and I'm looking, I can see something's down. I can see what that's automatically going to affect, even though we're smaller, so it's kind of in my head. But I can immediately see if my top level is down, what's it going to affect underneath. It's just automatically there in the topology for me.
Great, thank you. One other thing that I like to, one of my favorite things about this is because you have it all in this one unified network, as Terry said, you can navigate through the topology. As we saw, you can go to the clients page and find the access point or switch a client's connected to, or even the port on a switch. And then once you're there, you can trace right through the network. So from here, we go, well, here's this access point on this port. We can just click on that access point and jump over to manage that access point. So again, highlighting this concept that, oh, this is actually the newer AP page that we got onto. So let me jump back here. We've got a new version of that page that we're betaing, which is what you just saw for a moment there. So we can jump over to the APs, look at an individual AP and say, okay, this AP is connected to this port. Let's go take a look at that port. And there it is. So, sorry, I got something in my throat there that just won't go away. Let's take a look at some of the other capabilities here. Terry, feel free to point me at anything that you think is interesting. I want to highlight the summary
if
report.
you could just go back to the, let's look at the wireless.
The access points?
I use this, yeah, access points is fine. I use this every day probably. Again, when somebody can't connect. Now let me just point to where you see the green amberish color and the red on that first live access point, the SMS library WAP2. Now that might be concerning. It's happening today because they're actually installing that today. So you can see it's coming up and down. And again, I knew they were here. I knew they were physically putting the wires in and actually hooking it up for me today because I could see that it was coming and going and that they were working on it. So it literally is live. I've got it all configured. I handed it to someone to climb up the ladder and mount it on the ceiling, and I can see that he's doing so. So again, and I was getting notifications on my phone so that I knew that the work was actually happening. And I see that he's had it come up and down a couple of times, and I know that they're on a lift. The library has a very high ceiling. So they're on a lift, and they're going up and down doing what they need to do to mount it for me. So again, it's live. Whatever you're seeing there that's going on is live. And as you said before, even if I didn't have external connectivity today because of some outage, the system inside would still be working for me.
Exactly. Since we're on this page, I wanted to highlight real briefly the live tools here. So earlier I talked about some of the diagnostic and troubleshooting tools that are built into the dashboard, and a lot of those are found in this live tools menu. And you're going to see this for access points, switches, security appliances. There's a version of it for MDM endpoints as well. And you look here and you see things like channel utilization to give you an idea of wireless interference. You can do a ping, you can do a trace route, you can do a throughput test, you can reboot the AP if you need to. If you click reboot, it's going to say, hey, are you sure? And this is one of my favorite features. It's such a small thing, but it's so valuable. Blink LEDs, what it does is when you click on this little play button here, as you might expect from the name, it blinks the LEDs on the device. And this is something that works for all Meraki hardware devices. So if you're in a scenario where, let's say, Terry has to have someone go onto a particular part of the campus or a particular satellite and replace an access point or plug something into a switch, instead of saying, hey, go into this corner of the room, look on the ceiling, there's an AP over here, or hey, look at the switch that's got this serial number, this label, you can just click LEDs and then say, hey, find me the one that's flashing. That's the AP I need you to replace, or that's the switch I want you to plug into port 4 of. So it's a great little remote management tool that's very helpful when you're dealing with an on-site team and trying to kind of guide them toward what you needed them to do in a remote hands situation.
Absolutely. I've already used it in the first year. It has been helpful in sending a technician who's not familiar with what's in a closet, blink the lights and say, do you see the lights blinking? That's the one. And it actually has saved us time and effort.
So I see here that you've got some enabled and some disabled SSIDs. Do you mind talking about that a little bit, how you're using some of the SSID availability features?
It was very important to our business official, for example, that the district office kind of be held only in their little corner of the world. So, for example, their SSID is not available globally for their devices and their BYOD, but there are many, such as our student access and our adult access for teachers and staff, that are global. Every access point will host that SSID and allow them to just move throughout our buildings, move across the campus, move to another site, and just be able to connect. Whereas we have a few that we're a little pickier about, such as the DO, where they want to house it just on their devices in their area and maybe a few other locations. So again, the ability to have multiple SSIDs has been wonderful for us because we're able to personalize it and lock down. I've actually been able to make event SSIDs temporarily for a weekend for a conference and then just remove that come Monday. Just have that not be available. I can use the scheduling to trim down the time that it is available on the weekend, and I can just get rid of it when the weekend's done. So it's really been handy for us. We've played with it all year long. I think we finally settled on something that makes everybody happy as far as configuration, but it was, trial and error. It all worked. It was what we wanted to do with it that was really our question because there's just so many options. But I think we finally found our little niche, and people are very happy. Again, every teacher and staff member in our district pretty much has a laptop. So, and I do have teachers who attend meetings at other buildings before and after school. They can take their laptop and go wherever they want, and they're connected at all sites because that SSID is broadcast through every access device we have.
Great, thank you. So we're going to jump back into some slides for just a couple minutes. We may actually come back to the dashboard because during the Q&A, there's usually a couple questions that prompt us, oh, hey, that's a great thing to show, let's talk about that. But we'll jump back into the slides just for a few moments before we get into the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and, Terry, put you on mute just briefly, and I'll bring you back at the end for questions. All right, so we looked at a couple of these products here. We look specifically at the MR and MS in Terry's work. These are the 4 products that are offered by Cisco Meraki. You've got the MR access points, which are kind of our flagship. Our original product line was wireless, so these are the descendants of that. We've got the MX Security Appliance, which is the product that I've worked on here at Meraki for the last 3 years or so, which is a UTM, or Unified Threat Management device, so security features, routing features, content filtering, things like that. We've got the MS switches at both layer 2 and layer 3. Great lineup of switches, a pretty varied lineup, a lot of different switches with different ports, different numbers of ports, PoE, non-PoE, aggregation switches, access switches, right? And then the MDM, which is really a pretty remarkable product. Systems Manager started out as this kind of weird software unit, software agent that we didn't really know what to do with. And we knew it was going to be useful for something, but we didn't really know what. And it's been floating around in the Meraki ether for years. And it was only a couple years ago that we really said, you know what we can do? This would make a really great MDM platform. So what we did with that is we built it into a mobile device management product that now is really powerful and really feature dense and has a ton of capabilities and is free for up to 100 devices. So it's really easy to test and demo and play with. I use it at home. I've got it on all of my different, like my Apple devices, my laptop. I've got it on, my Android tablet. My fiance has it on her laptop. So it's super useful for tracking devices, monitoring devices, being able to easily manage a fleet of devices, let's say Chromebooks or iPads, especially in an education environment where you tend to have a set of devices that you don't want leaving the location and you want to be able to manage easily, and we have geolocation features built in. We have integration between the MDM and the network, so you can do things like use the MDM to control who gets onto the wireless, to apply different traffic and security policies. It's a very powerful platform that we've managed to integrate pretty cleanly with the rest of the stack. So it's something that I'm really impressed with over the last couple of years, seeing that grow. So I want to mention something that's really, really, I think, a powerful tool that you as a potential customer have with Meraki, which is our evaluation program. Our evaluation program is one of the best I've ever worked with. You can do an evaluation for any Meraki product, so if you want to try out an MX, MS, or MR, as I said with Systems Manager, since it's free to up to 100 devices, you can just try it without really needing to go through the process of an evaluation. But we make this very easy. Turnaround time's really quick. We get you the gear, you use it, you see what you think, and then potentially you buy it or you don't, and that's fine too. But we feel that so much of the value of this product is in the using of it. It's one of those really the proof is in the pudding kind of things where we can talk about it, we can show you networks, we can demo, and that's great, and it gives you some idea, but really it's not until you use it yourself that you go, oh, this is why this is so great. This makes life so much easier. I mean, as a former Meraki customer, it changed the way I thought about networking, and that's not a facetious comment, it really did, because it was like, oh, it can actually be this easy. So that's one of the reasons why we have this evaluation program. We want to make sure that anyone who wants to try this can, because we really believe that the majority of people who try it will fall in love with the technology, fall in love with the platform, and will want to move forward with Meraki. We actually have a dedicated team that supports these evaluations. Over in support, we have a team that just does these evaluations and trials. Great group. They'll help you with setup. They'll help you with any issues you run into. They're very, very, very very competent folks. Who are great to work with. Also, if and when you do purchase, we have all-inclusive pricing. Our licensing model is very simple. You have the hardware, you have the license. The license includes all the features, firmware updates, future features, support, warranty, everything. So you really just have device and license, which keeps things very simple. You don't have to worry about having different licensing levels throughout your organization. You don't have to worry about am I licensed for this feature, right? Do I have a support license? All of that is built into the one license that we use. So with that, let's go ahead and answer some questions, and that may lead us back into the dashboard as we go. So I have a couple questions that Tanya has written up on the board for me here that came up earlier that I want to address. The first one being, is there an on-premise option to access the devices? The answer is there's a very, very limited on-premises kind of model, but it's not for managing the devices. It's purely for getting them connected to the cloud. So there is a local page that you can go to. In fact, let me see, I should be able to just show it to you here since I'm sitting here in the office and we use our own equipment. So for instance, if I go to, oh no, I'm on wired, I forgot, so let's try that. Here's our MX. This is our security appliance at the head of our network, our firewall. So every Meraki device has a page like this that you get to just by going to the device itself via a local web page. Now, all you can do here is kind of monitor the health of the connectivity to the cloud, get some information, and I'm not going to go into it, but if I logged in here, I would configure the uplink. So configure, let's say, a static IP or proxy information. The only purpose of this page is to get you to the point where you can connect the device to the cloud if you need to do something like set a static IP in order to get connectivity to the internet. Once you've done that, everything else is done through the cloud dashboard. So the only on-premise piece is really to enable you to connect to the cloud. All of the actual management and monitoring is done through the cloud offering. I've got another question here, and this one's for you, Terry. How has Meraki allowed you, and let me actually make sure you're not on mute before I ask. There we go. How has Meraki allowed you to solve problems on your network around unauthorized bring your own device scenarios, like people bringing in devices that you don't want on the network?
Actually, we haven't seen with Meraki too many devices trying to get on. I do see under Air Marshal, which we didn't actually show every day, I see a number of students carrying devices that are broadcasting networks. Yeah, if you go, yeah, this one has been very helpful to us as far as figuring out anybody who's trying to carry a device and maybe try to connect a school device to their little pocket network, be it a little MiFi or whatever they've got going on. But we haven't seen too many people accessing BYOD as an issue. We do have a student BYOD in the high school. We had 60 students sign up for it. We have a process, I want to call it. You know, they have to sign something that they'll agree to all the guidelines, et cetera. And then I'm notified that they've done that. I create right here inside of Meraki a user account for them, username and password, so that they can log on. One thing they're the users. One thing that did let me do this past year was I found a young man who didn't follow the rules that he signed. He put his phone on our wireless as also his girlfriend's, and I realized that Amy was probably not his phone. And I notified our principal, who, you know, called him in and said, look, you know, you're supposed to use your own personal devices. You're not allowed to just put anybody on the network that you'd like. The kid was surprised that we knew it wasn't his and that we knew everything about it, that it was an Android, that it was Amy's and exactly what she had on it. I mean, the information was extensive, enough, certainly enough to prove to the young man we knew what he was doing and not to do it again. He was the only one who challenged the guidelines and got caught. And we're small enough that we know gossip works. I'm sure he went right to the cafeteria and told everyone there, don't do it, because they do know everything you're doing. And that's been really helpful. I can tell with the students that I'm putting on through users, I can actually tell who they are and what device they're on and even the applications installed on those devices. So if I have a student who has been granted the BYOD access and I take a peek, I can see if he's got anything dangerous on there that might try to scan our network or capture passwords or do anything that we would have an issue with.
All right, great. So let's see what other questions we have here. Pull this screen back up, or did I hide it somewhere? Oh, there we go. I always throw it to the bottom of the page and forget. Let's see here. Got the on-prem question. Okay, here we go. Can you build a segmented guest network and push it to the device from dashboard? So you can build. There's a couple different ways to build guest networks with Meraki. One is to obviously do VLAN segmentation if you're using a switch or a security appliance. If you're using the access points, you have a couple different options. So you have the ability to bridge a particular guest SSID onto a guest VLAN you've set up on your wired network, or we have some built-in options that allow you to kind of do a very clean guest setup. And I don't know if it's being used. Are you using NAT mode anywhere in this network by any chance, Terry? Here we go.
Yeah, we are.
Looks like this. So NAT mode is a pretty cool functionality. NAT mode is very well tailored for guest deployments, or for guest SSIDs, I should say, because it does a few different things. It isolates clients from each other. So one guest user can't compromise the device of another user, so you don't have to worry about, something happening on your guest network where one malicious user is going in and trying to get data from other people's computers on the guest network, things like that. It also isolates them from your network, where they get auto-assigned a 10 dot IP address that's actually based on a hash of the MAC address of the device, and that is totally separate from your IP scheme on your network, because we're natting through the access point, which means when they connect to the guest network, they get an IP, and that doesn't tell them anything about the actual subnet layout of your network, which can be valuable, right? The less data they have about your internal network, the better as a guest user. Finally, you also have the ability here to go into the firewall and traffic shaping page, and there's a pre-built firewall rule right at the top, but you set up firewall rules at layer 3 and layer 7 per SSID. So we have this pre-built one that just blocks them from accessing anything on the local LAN. So anything on your network, they won't be able to get to. So this is great if you just want guests to hit the internet and nothing else, or if you want them to hit, let's say, a particular server, mail server, or particular file server here. You'd put in the IP, you'd say, okay, allow TCP port 445, which is Windows file sharing, right, CIFS, to this destination, and deny all access to local LAN, and then allow them to the internet. So it's very useful for that kind of guest segmentation. So hopefully, Frank, that answered your question. Joel asks, in a secure environment that requires HTTP proxy for outbound access, can you still use the cloud? Yes. So on that local page that we were looking at, in the configuration section, which I'm not going to show you because I don't have the credentials for the network here because I'm not on the IT team, you actually have the ability to use an HTTP proxy to communicate with the cloud. So you can do that. We have customers who do. With rogue requests, let's see. Can Meraki detect malicious software? And if so, is it detected by Meraki itself, or is there a security vendor that's used? So there's a couple different pieces here. Malicious software installation is something that we can detect using the MDM. So the MDM will basically poll all these devices and figure out what's installed on them. So that's one side of it in a kind of corporate-owned or fleet-owned education institution-owned device environment. For the security features of the MX security appliance, for things like malware scanning, we use third parties for a couple of them. So the content filtering is through a service called BrightCloud, and the security stuff is through SourceFire for the IPS, which is part of Cisco, and Kaspersky for the antivirus. Now, you don't have to manage the patching of any of that. We do it automatically. So we, in the same way that we deliver things like firmware updates from the cloud based on a schedule that you've set up, we automatically update antivirus signatures, IPS signatures, content filtering, databases. We do all of that automatically, and we do it by default on an hourly basis. We do that update. You can tune that down to every day or every week if you're worried about how much bandwidth it's consuming on a low bandwidth link, or let's say you failed over to cellular or something like that. But by default, we update that every hour, so you never have to worry about your signatures being out of date. Are you able to configure a switch using command line if you want to? Absolutely not. There is no command line at all for Meraki. And I don't mean like you don't have access to it. It doesn't exist. There is no command line. It's purely GUI based, and the GUI interacts directly with the firmware. It's designed specifically to be managed through this cloud portal. Great question on kind of internal competition integration. How does this compete with or complement an existing Cisco network? Do you have to replace the whole network to get use out of the Meraki solution? And that's a totally fair question. You certainly don't need to. What we find is there's a combination of things that customers will do. One of the more common deployment models for Meraki is what we call a hybrid deployment, and you can actually see that in the Schalmont network. If we go back here, we go back to that topology we were looking at earlier, we can see that while we have Meraki switching and Meraki wireless here, up here we actually have Cisco Enterprise, Cisco Catalyst, right, 4500Xs. So we have lots of customers who use that hybrid deployment of either, let's say, an ASA or SourceFire NGIPS with Meraki switching and wireless, or potentially Catalyst switching with Meraki wireless, Meraki security, right? You can combine them any which way you want because each product operates independently as a standalone product. you do get a lot of value out of combining them because you get some of the integration pieces, especially when you get into the MDM or like being able to navigate. As we saw, you go to the client, from the client you hop to the access point you hop directly to the switch. Having all of it in that one portal is nice, but there certainly are customers who have hybrid deployments with Meraki and other Cisco products, and that's a totally valid solution. It works just as well. We have some tools as well for things like there's a Prime device pack that allows you to monitor Meraki devices so that you can monitor both Meraki and non-Meraki Cisco devices in one portal. There's NetFlow capability has actually just been released for the MX in beta, so that's coming, which will allow you to aggregate traffic data from non-Meraki Cisco devices with Meraki devices. So we do want to make sure that customers don't have to rip and replace all of their existing gear to go Meraki. We want to make sure that you can do particular parts of the solution or the whole solution, what we call the full stack. Either way is a totally valid option, and we want to make sure that we're helping customers to do either. All right. So that's all the questions that we've got thus far. I'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll probably give you 5 minutes of your day back. So let's see if anyone's got. If you've got final questions, now's the time to throw them in there. While we wait for that, there's one cool thing that I like to show that I skipped during the demo that we're going to go back and look at. And this is actually not a dashboard feature or a product feature. It's just something cool that I like to highlight. This is our demo landing page. So when I log in as a demo user, right, as a member of the marketing team, I get this page saying, here are all the networks available for demo. And they're customers who have agreed to let us demo with using their networks, or it's our internal networks, right? We've got our, what we call Meraki Corp, the Cisco San Francisco office. We've got our systems manager network. Here on the right is actually a live kind of map of all of the active Meraki networks, meaning that they've been online. A device in this network's been online in the last 24 hours. And you can see here, there's a lot of green. All these green dots represent live Meraki networks. So if you look at North America, especially US, Canada, and Mexico, right, you get into South America here, and you see parts of South America, parts of South Africa, and other parts of Africa, Western Europe totally blanketed, parts of Eastern Europe, up into the Nordics, Southeast Asia, Japan, Eastern Australia, bits of Western Australia, New Zealand. When I started at Meraki 3 years ago, there was a lot less green on this map. So it's really cool to see the adoption of this technology. People have really kind of flooded, or not flooded, that's not the word I was looking for. They've kind of come running to this technology because it solves very real problems of complexity and just not having the hours in the day to do all the things you want to do with the network and to manage and maintain the network. So bringing a solution out that really helps you do that is, I think, why we're seeing the green really grow so much in this map. And the goal is to see it grow even more, especially in some of the regions where we don't have a presence today, which that part of the globe is getting smaller and smaller. When I started, there was almost nothing in Australia, New Zealand, Eastern Europe, Japan. So we're really starting to see the Meraki solution kind of spread and take over, which is really cool to see because it means we're bringing something to the market that people want and people need. So there's my little spiel. Okay, we got 2 more questions. I'm going to answer these 2, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Does the dashboard show the health of other vendor equipment? The dashboard does not show anything except Meraki equipment, with 2 caveats. One is that topology that we looked at. Obviously, you can see non-Meraki devices there, but it's just going to tell you data about that device that we got from LLDP or CDP. It's not going to tell you the health, like SNMP style health, because we don't use SNMP to monitor devices. We use that M-tunnel. We use proprietary stuff internally. You can monitor Meraki devices with SNMP through Prime or other SNMP monitoring tools. So one way that you can see data about other devices is through the topology, through this LLDP and CDP data, but not health. The only other thing you can do with a non-Meraki device is the MDM, right? You can manage and monitor things like Apple iOS or OS X devices, sorry, Mac OS, not specifically OS X, Android, Windows devices, right? Windows Phone, Chrome OS. So that's the only piece that's really designed around monitoring non-Meraki devices. The networking side of it, on the networking stack, it's not going to manage or monitor any non-Meraki networking device. And finally, with BYOD, is a client installed on the user's device, and is there a way to configure a setting to remove the client once the device is off the company network? So you can do it either way. Some customers use what I call pure BYOD, which is kind of clientless, which is just you manage it on the network side. So you have BYOD policies that are configured on the network that determine how traffic is passed, what SSIDs they can get onto, what security settings, what firewall rules, right, all of that. That's one way, and that's totally agentless. It's purely on the network side. If you're using the MDM, a Systems Manager MDM product, as a BYOD or at least partial BYOD solution, you do have the ability to say, in order to get onto my network, they have to enroll in Systems Manager. They have to enroll in my MDM so I can manage their device, so that anyone who's getting to the internet through my network, I need to be able to manage that device because they're using my network space and potentially using for things I don't want them to use it for, so I need to be able to manage and control that. If you do that, there is an ability to use what we call geofencing to remove the profile or the client from the user's device when they leave the area. So they come onto the campus, they connect to the guest Wi-Fi, and it says you must enroll in our mobile device management. Here's the link. Go ahead and enroll. If they enroll, then you've got them in your management port. And then if they leave the campus, once the device goes, oh, I've left that location, Systems Manager will send down a command and say, oh, go ahead and pull this profile off, so that you're not managing it once they've left. So that's a great question. All right, so with that, we're finishing up right on time. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Terry, for your time and all the information you've given us. It's been extremely helpful. And I hope everyone has a great day.